Welcome to Innovator's Journey, the show where we go behind the experiences and defining moments that inspire people to dedicate their lives to helping others. I'm Nick Frank. Today I'm joined by Dr. Mariela Vargas-Irwin, the Executive Director of Applied Behavioral Learning Services. Dr. Vargas-Irwin has spent more than 30 years working with children and families affected by autism, helping guide parents through assessment, support, and individualized care. Her passion for the field began during a visit to an autism center in Venezuela, an experience that shaped a lifelong commitment to helping families better understand and support their children. Dr. Vargas-Irwin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've spent more than those 3 decades working with children's families, all affected by autism. Looking back, what was it that drew you to this field in the first place, and how did that early experience shape the way you approach care today?
Well, I was blessed to have found my vocation very early on. As a young psychologist, the moment I stepped to an autism center, I just knew that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Because for the first time, I was finally able to see the application of what I had been reading in books to actually help people. So I started reading B.F. Skinner when I was about 14 years old. And then when I walked into that autism center, Sovenia in Venezuela, I was able to see what I had read in the books actually applied to help children. And I have been doing applied behavior analysis ever since.
Now, you've talked about how autism is not a one-size-fits-all, and that the assessment plays a really critical role. It's like I have children, parents are really overwhelmed about these situations and how they think about choosing the right type of assessment. Like, why does that timing and why does that matter so much?
I think that the biggest mistake that parents and clinicians make is that they focus on comparing their children to other children. And that is important early on because you need to first figure out whether your child has a developmental disability, whether he's falling behind. And then you have to obtain a diagnosis in order to get the services that will actually help him or her. But once you have that diagnosis, once you have the services, the focus really needs to shift to progress. Is she learning how to communicate? Is he becoming more independent? And really that focus on comparing your child to themselves and figure out whether they're making progress or not is the reason why we created the Boston Assessment of Behavioral Core Skills, the Boston ABCs, because it is really the first criterion reference test that measures development and progress systematically.
It seems to me there's a growing awareness, understanding of autism, especially over the last handful of years. What factors do you think are contributing to that shift, and how do you think it's changing how families approach a diagnosis and ongoing support?
One of the reasons that we hear more about autism is because of awareness itself. So more people know about autism, but it's also important to keep in mind that the diagnostic criteria changed in 2013 when Asperger's and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified were eliminated from the diagnostic manual that we used to classify mental disorders. So when those diagnoses were eliminated, they created a single autism spectrum that is used to diagnose all the children. So you either have autism or you don't, but there is a wide range within autism that includes children with very mild presentations that would have never been diagnosed 30 years ago when I went into the field.
And let's talk a little bit about your work at Applied Behavioral Learning Services. So your work a lot of times focuses on measurable, behavioral-based approaches. How does your autism assessment reflect that balance between this behavioral approach, embracing neurodiversity, and what makes it different than maybe a more traditional method?
As Margaret Mead said, the true measure of a society is its ability to take care of the most vulnerable members. And this balance between embracing and celebrating neurodiversity, but at the same time working systematically to address those behaviors that are interfering with progress is really what makes ABLES different than other centers. And that is what the Boston ABCs does. It measures in a reliable and valid way progress over time. Because at the end of the day, regardless of whether you have autism or not, what matters is your progress relative to yourself and not how you compare with others.
Sure. And if you're a parent that has a child that may or may not have a learning disability, autism, what would you kind of suggest to them if they should come get tested, or what would your advice to them be?
Well, the first step is to have your pediatrician guide you and let you know if you need a developmental assessment. And then that assessment, the very first assessment that you're going to have, is going to tell you whether your child is behind developmentally or not, and then perhaps result in a diagnosis. Now, once you have the diagnosis, then the question is, why are you seeking that assessment? Do you want to know whether your child is making progress or not? Do you want to know how to address a particular behavior that is really interfering with their functioning? Or do you want to know whether the services that they are receiving are appropriate? So all those kinds of assessments are very different than a diagnostic assessment that will compare your child with other children.
Yeah. And if people at home want to learn a little bit more about what you're working on at Applied Behavioral Learning Services, where can they go?
The best way to reach us is through our website, ablspartners.org, or through email.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Vargas-Irwin, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, if this conversation resonated with you, follow the show, share it with someone else who cares deeply about education, inclusion, and needs meaningful support systems. Once again, thank you so much to Dr. Mariela Vargas-Irwin for joining me. I'm Nick Frank, and we'll catch you for the next Innovator's Journey.